Hello, my name is Misha and welcome back to my car podcast series. If you watched my last few travel vlogs, you might know that I took my first ever solo trip this year and it was honestly life-changing. So for today's episode, I thought that I could talk all things solo travel, my experience, my tips that I have from my fellow female solo travelers, and I also wanted to answer some questions. When I came back from my trip, I told some of my friends that I went on my first ever solo trip and they actually didn't know about it, so they asked me a lot of questions and I wrote them all down because I thought that others might have the same questions. So yeah, let's get started. But yeah, before we get started with the questions, I'll give you a quick recap if you didn't watch my solo travel diaries. Basically, I went on my first ever solo trip this year to England. I went in the month of June, and I thought that England would be the best place for me to start my solo travel journey for a few reasons. The first and the main reason is because I was going there for the Eras Tour concert. My cousin's friend managed to get us some tickets, and since I was flying to London for the concert anyways, I thought that I would turn the whole thing into a solo trip. The second reason is I've been to England a few times since I have family there, so this year it was my 5th time going, so I knew that it wouldn't be too scary on my own. And the third reason is I've always dreamed of moving to England ever since the first time I went there. I think I was 6 at the time, and I just knew that it was going to be it for me, so I thought that this solo trip would be a good way for me to test out the waters and see if I would actually like it. So yeah, I started my solo trip in Brighton. I wanted to go there for a few years now, and actually the last time I was there in England in 2019, I tried to go, but it didn't work out with our schedule, and also no one wanted to come with me, so I thought that this solo trip would be the perfect opportunity for me to go there. So yeah, I stayed in Brighton for 4 days and then I went to London for a week. I already talked about my experience in those two cities in my travel vlog, so I'm not gonna repeat myself here because I know that I sound like a broken record, but I honestly fell in love with Brighton and I fell harder for London. I have never felt so much peace and contentment in my life as I did solo traveling in England. The whole experience changed me in a way I never could have imagined, and actually when I came back home, I felt so off. I didn't feel like myself and I kept wondering why I was feeling this way, and it wasn't until I talked about it with my friend who actually also came back from an amazing trip, and she made me realize that the reason I was feeling this way is because I never truly came back home and that I had left a piece of myself there in England. And honestly, just like knowing that gave me some peace and closure. I think that it's a beautiful thing to be able to leave a part of yourself somewhere where you felt like you truly had a soul place connection, and in a way it's like you still exist there. It's honestly a privilege to be able to experience something like that, and I know that it may sound cheesy to some, but I had so many moments on this trip where I felt like I had to capture every single detail with all my 5 senses so I would never forget it. And I feel like in those moments, by doing that, I lived life so intensely that I ended up leaving parts of myself in England. And yeah, like I don't know if this makes sense to anyone, but it makes sense to me. And yeah, I'm gonna stop talking about it before I get too emotional. It's too early to be emotional. It's a Saturday morning. So yeah, let's get started with the questions. So the first question I was asked is if I was scared, nervous, excited, or anxious. And my answer is yes to all the emotions. I planned this trip for 6 months just because I wanted to be ready for when the time came to leave. But despite all the planning, a few days before my trip, I started feeling so anxious. I started having doubts, and I think that I was low-key doubting myself, and I was just nervous, and I think I was overthinking the whole thing, and I was scared a little bit for my safety and everything. But at the same time, I was also really excited. It was definitely like a weird period of time. But yeah, the day finally came and I was nervous, but I was also like ready to go. And my main goal that day was honestly just to leave looking confident so my parents wouldn't worry about me since it was my first ever solo trip. So yeah, I played it cool, or at least I like to think that I did. But the whole time I was just like biting my tongue so I wouldn't cry. And my dad was actually the one who dropped me off at the airport, and it started to become like all too real. But I was still trying my best to keep things light. And basically he dropped me off, he hugged me, and he said to like text him when I was like in and everything. And I couldn't speak because I knew that the moment I would say a word I would start crying, so I just like nodded and like went in, and the whole time I was just like looking down so he wouldn't see my eyes. But I think like he had a feeling, like I think your parents always know. But yeah, then I cried a little like as I was entering the airport, and as soon as I stepped foot into the airport, I was like all good. Like all of it just went away. Like I quickly got my shit together, I felt excited again, I was calm, and I was feeling even like hopeful. And I remember the whole time, like after I passed security and everything, I was like smiling to myself like a maniac because I felt like I was the main character, and I was the main character. Like, let's admit it, I was solo traveling. And yeah, I was just like feeling so good and like ready. But yeah, I still cried when the plane left Montreal, and when the plane landed in London, I was good again. It was so weird. It was like a switch had flipped in my brain, and I was good again. I was feeling excited, and I honestly just couldn't believe that I was doing this thing that I wanted to do for so long. It honestly felt surreal that I was even there. Like, I think that I wasn't even processing that. But yeah, all that to say, it's completely normal to feel all these emotions, especially when you're doing something that feels so big to you. And let's be honest, solo traveling is a big thing. But yeah, just remember that leaving is always the hardest part, but as soon as you get to your destination, everything just goes away and you just end up being okay. The second question I was asked is, how did I know I was ready for a solo trip? I think I knew I was ready for a solo trip for a while now. I've honestly just become so comfortable with my own presence, and I love doing things by myself, so I knew that I was ready for the next big step, and that was to take a solo trip. And I also talked a little bit about this in my first car podcast video. The second reason I knew I was ready for a solo trip is because I also really enjoy talking to like random people. I'm totally okay striking up a conversation with a stranger, but yeah, I've definitely noticed this about myself more this year, and I'm really happy that I'm able to do that. And the yapper in me definitely really helps. But yeah, I feel like if you want to make the most out of a solo trip, you have to be comfortable like just chatting with people. And the last reason I knew I was ready for it is because I never doubted for once that one day I would be taking a solo trip. It's something that I've always wanted to do, like ever since I was young, and I feel like it's because I've always been so independent, like ever since I was a kid. And I don't know if it's because I'm a middle child, but I don't like to rely on anyone for anything, and I've always been this way. So I feel like the detachment and the independence that like came with it really prepared me for my solo trip. The third question I was asked is, did I stay in a hostel? And the answer to that question is no, I did not stay in a hostel. I'm definitely not a hostel girly. So when I was in Brighton, I stayed in a hotel, and when I was in London, I booked myself a small studio in Notting Hill just so I could have a feel of what it would be like to live in London. The fourth question was, how did I meet people? And obviously the best way to meet people is by staying in hostels with other solo travelers. So since I didn't stay in a hostel, I was definitely a bit nervous about meeting people because that's something I really wanted to do. But guess what? You can do just that without staying in a hostel. It just requires a little bit more effort. So the way I met people was by booking a few group activities, and I also planned on joining some running clubs, but unfortunately the day I had signed up for the run club, I had already like walked 30k steps and I was so tired, and I just didn't have it in me to run a 5k, so I didn't end up going. But that would have been such a cool way to meet people, and honestly looking back, I regret not saving some energy for that because I feel like that would have been really cool. But yeah, there's always next time. I also met people just by going up to them, and I noticed that actually a lot of people came up to me to talk, and when I was telling my friend this, she said it's because of the energy and the aura that was radiating, and I definitely agree with this. I felt so free and open there. I was like smiling while exploring the cities, and I felt like my heart was smiling too, and I feel like people were definitely drawn to that energy, and my whole vibe just made me like that much more approachable. But yeah, I met some of the nicest people ever who made me feel so at home and so comforted, and even talking about it just makes me like so emotional. But I'm so grateful for all the interactions that I had, and I feel like the universe put them on my path for a purpose, so I'm also really grateful to the universe for that. But yeah, those people definitely changed my life. I will never forget them, and they're in my heart forever. So yeah, even if they're not watching my video, I want to shout out Nora, Harrison, Elvira, Bethany, Freya, the old couple that I had tea with in that little tea shop, the monk that I met in London who literally changed the trajectory of my life, the Moroccan guy that I met at the beach in Brighton, the London guy himself, and so many others. I'm so grateful for all of them, and they mean so much to me, and it's crazy that they don't even know that. But yeah, they made my trip that much more memorable. And yeah, so question number 5 is, who took your pictures? My friend asked me this question, and I thought it was so funny because, to be completely honest, I was asking myself the same question before I went on my trip, and the answer is I just asked like random people. Definitely like scout out people who give off like a good energy and who know what they're doing. So yeah, I just asked like random people, and a lot of people came up to me to do the same thing, and so it just ended up being a mutual thing. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask. Everyone is there to make memories, and if you see someone who's by themselves taking a selfie, go up to them and offer to take a picture of them. They will really appreciate it, and I did that a few times, and people really appreciate that, and that's how I ended up meeting Elvira, and we even ended up taking a selfie together because we just like hit it off. The next question is, did I do anything to prepare for the solo trip? I honestly don't think I did much. The most important thing that I did was really prioritizing spending time by myself and just becoming comfortable being on my own. I also watched a lot of TikToks and YouTube videos of other female solo travelers for safety tips. The last thing I did was preparing an itinerary for most days, but I'm also a type A person, so I plan for everything anyways. but I found that really helpful because I was able to like map places out and I knew what I was doing, so I didn't look too lost or touristy. So yeah, I would definitely recommend doing that. But yeah, to be completely honest, I don't think you'll ever feel like 100% ready. Even if you do a lot of planning, a lot of research, there's still gonna be that part of you that's like unsure or like anxious about something. So yeah, you just have to take the leap and go for it. So the next question is, how did I keep safe, especially solo traveling in a dangerous city like London? Now I know that lately London has gained a little bit of a bad rep, but to be completely honest, I felt safe like 98% of the time, but I did do a few things to keep safe, so I'll just walk you through that. So my number one concern, other than the stabbings, was the phone snatching. Now that's gone really bad in London, so yeah, to keep myself safe from that, I got myself a phone lanyard so I could keep my phone on me the whole time, especially when I was like visiting touristy spots or like going to busy areas or taking the tube. I also didn't take out my phone to look at directions because I feel like that's also an easy way for someone to snatch your phone. So for that, I have two recommendations. So one, headphones. If you put a headphone in and you have your Google Maps on or your Apple Maps, it's going to tell you where to go, where to turn, and then all of that. And two, which is really cool, is if you have an Apple Watch, it's also going to tell you where to go. And since I have an Apple Watch, that's what I was really using to get to places. But yeah, if you don't have either of those things, just like take a look and then put it away, and then if you need to look at it again, do it quickly and then put it away. The second thing that I did to keep safe was to stay close to other people, so if something were to happen, I would hope that someone would be able to help. Number three, I didn't stay out too late, especially in London. Like, my rule was to be back at my Airbnb before total darkness, and it was nice because I was there in June, so the sun sets at like 10 in London, so I was still able to stay out late, or what I consider to be late. Number four, I asked my friends to check my location every now and then. Obviously they wouldn't be able to do much since they were here in Canada and I was there in London, but to me it was like a reassuring thing that someone had my location. Number five, I carried a portable safety alarm with me at all times just in case. And safety tip number six is to always lie. I was approached by a few guys while I was there and they were all nice guys, they just wanted to talk, but as soon as they would hear my accent, like, they obviously knew that I wasn't from England, so they would ask me like where I'm from, what I'm doing, and I would always just say that I'm like with family, or like I'm visiting them and they're like nearby or something like that, and that seemed to work. But yeah, if you're planning on solo traveling, definitely keep your wits about you, be aware of like where you are, who you're around, and lastly, like, never tell anyone that you're there alone because you just never know. The next question actually comes from my mom, and she asked me if I was ever bored, and my answer to her was no, I was never bored. I had fun the whole time, whether it was like talking to people, doing things, just like exploring, even like reading my book by the beach or in a park. I always found something to do and I always had fun, and to be honest, I do consider myself to be like a fun person, so I feel like I could never be bored with myself. But yeah, that's the fun thing about solo traveling, you can do anything you want anytime you want. So yeah, that's why I could never be bored. Moving on to the next question, which is, would I ever go on another solo trip? And I don't even have to think about it. The answer is yes, I absolutely will, and I cannot wait. Question number 10, is there anything that I would do differently? Yes, I would definitely make an effort to exchange contacts with the people I meet. That's the one thing I regret not doing on this trip. I feel like I got so like caught up in the conversation, and I was probably like a little bit nervous to ask to exchange contacts because I thought I was like a little bit weird, but honestly it's not that weird. And I feel like if I had, I would have gone the selfie that I took with Elvira, because she took it on her phone, so I will never see that selfie ever again. But yeah, that's the one thing I would do differently. And the last question is, how do I feel now that it's done? I'm honestly so proud of myself for committing to it and just taking the leap and having the time of my life. It was honestly a dream, and I'd be lying if I said that I don't think about it every day. I wish that I could go back to those days, and just like thinking about it like makes me so emotional because it was so freeing and honestly one of the best experiences I've ever had in my life. You get to learn so much about yourself when you solo travel, and one thing that I learned about myself is that I'm a lot of fun, and I'm so happy with who I am and how I'm approaching life at this moment. Another thing that I learned while solo traveling is that the majority of people are good, so don't be too afraid, just trust your instincts. I'm honestly so grateful for the whole experience. Like, it's genuinely changed my life for the better, and I feel like I have clarity of what I want in my life and the the direction I want to take. So yeah, those were all the questions that I had. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments down below. It would make me so happy to be able to answer them. And yeah, I hope this video was somewhat helpful, especially if you're planning on taking your first solo trip, or if you're thinking about it. Just take this as a sign, take the leap, and just go for it. Trust me, you'll have the time of your life. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.